CEO here at the WA Council of Social Service, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here this morning. This is the fourth forum that WACOSS and the Department of Education have co-hosted to keep the community abreast of all the updates around the Child and Parent Centres initiative in WA. So before I begin, I'd just like to start, as is our tradition, by providing an acknowledgement that we're meeting this morning on the land of the Wadjuk Noongar people, who are the traditional owners of this area, together with the other... We lost the mic? Together with the other Noongar clans in the southwest region of WA, they've just reached quite an historic agreement with the state government on native title. So I also wanted to acknowledge and commend everyone who's been involved in that significant and challenging achievement, and also to acknowledge our support in the spirit of reconciliation for the acknowledgement of Australia's First Peoples in our Constitution and to support the Recognise campaign. We're really pleased to work in partnership with Reconciliation WA and encourage everyone in the community services sector and across the state government to support the various reconciliation initiatives that they're championing in our community. This morning's we've planned quite a jam-packed forum for you. I'm not going to speak for too long now, but shortly I'll invite up somebody who will be known to all of you, Robyn Kinkade from the Department of Education. She'll provide a bit of an update on the implementation and the very exciting recent news of the impending expansion of the Child and Parent Centres initiative. And also very exciting, we have with us our special guest from Interstate, Dr. Tim Moore. Tim, where are you? There you are. He's hiding up the back there. I'll say a few more words of introduction of Tim, who will provide our keynote presentation not too long away. And myself, I'll share with you a little bit of just the contextual issues, so what's happening in the early childhood landscape across South WA, and give you a bit of information about some of the other intersecting agendas, and talk a little bit also about the paper that's been circulated from the Community Services Roundtable. Little bit of housekeeping before I ask Robyn up. There is tea and coffee up the back. If you do need access to the toilets, they're just out the corridor down to your right, and then by the lane on the left, ladies on the left and men's on the right. If we do hear alarms and we need to evacuate the building, just follow WACOSS staff. We'll go out one of the exits here and assemble across the road in the park area. I'm sure we won't have that drama this morning, but you do never know. Welcome. Okay, so thanks very much to the Department of Education for partnering with us to make the forum possible, and invite Robyn to come and share a few words.
Hello everyone, and I know that some of you are very familiar with the Child and Parent Centre initiative. You've been on the journey with us since its beginning, and others are fairly new to it. So I've been asked, it's only about 15 minutes, and could you please keep me on time, to give a quick update about what we're doing at the moment. And so I thought what I would do, she was going to give me a clicker, but that's okay, I can do it. Just need to, which one do I click on? Right. So I thought what I would do is just go through a little bit about, maybe it's going to be difficult. Just set the scene in terms of the purpose, and I apologise in advance for those people who are already quite familiar with some of this material. The Child and Parent Centre initiative is an early intervention strategy, and it is focusing on children being able to begin the first years of schooling in such a way that they are capable and competent in all of the domains of development and can successfully engage with schooling. That's the intent, and the Department of Education leads the intent in partnership with a number of government and non-government organisations. Long term, we want to shift a normal curve to the right. We want to move the whole community, all of the children in the community, the vulnerable children, to be more successful in their transitions into school and more successful in their lifelong journey. The strategic intent. Initially, our Premier announced in the newspaper a few years ago now that he wanted to create a situation where we could invest in some of our vulnerable communities, and talked about building some buildings. We're not just building some buildings. It's the process and the journey that will make the difference, and the difference in outcomes for children. So the strategic intent of this initiative is to work in partnership and apply. I like to apply a change management structure, and I quite like Cotta's structure. So I'm actually going to use that structure to talk with you about the changes that are happening. I like a simple structure, an organisational change structure that gives some sense to what we're doing. We also work in the circles of influence. This is probably one of the first strategic initiatives I've been involved in, where we cover, it's an oldie but a goodie, Bronfenbrenner's model of influencing from the nuclear family right through to the policy and legislative framework. If you can influence across all of those circles, you've got an opportunity to actually have significant change, which will be embedded, but also be able to be maintained and sustained. And of course, that requires everybody on, requires local community members through to politicians. And that's what we are achieving with this initiative. And initially, we're working with individual through to a more integrated process. I've been working across government and non-government organisations since the early 80s, I'll say. And the difficulty is trying to work in a more collaborative and cooperative way. It's never an easy journey, and people often bandy around, we're going to have an integrated service, and I get very frustrated by that because integration takes a long time. And it's a journey, that can't be quickened, and so just have to keep moving forward. Okay, so the update, I'm just going to talk a little bit about these key points. An announcement that was made yesterday, some changes, outer circle of the model, to legislation, and some agreements that we're doing, some activity across our child and parent centre sites, an evaluation that started, and building. All right, so if we use Cotta's change management model, there are some key steps. The first step is creating an urgency for change. The second step is to form a powerful coalition. The third is to create a vision for change. The fourth is to communicate that vision. The fifth is to remove obstacles on the journey. The sixth is to create short-term wins. The seventh is to build on the change. And the eighth is to anchor the change in corporate culture. Here we're trying to anchor the change in Western Australian culture. Now, those are the 8 steps, but obviously not only do they go in sequence, but you also have to keep revisiting each step along the journey. So for the first one, creating the urgency for change, there's been evidence for many, many years that children in vulnerable communities start behind a lot of other children and they don't catch up. No matter what we do, I've been a psychologist for many years. I've worked with children and families for many years, and they don't catch up. They run in parallel. So we have to do things differently and look at ways, and this is one of the initiatives we're trying to do something different. The powerful coalition is from the Premier and Cabinet, the Partnership Forum that Irina and others sit on, WACOSS, of course, senior officers across government and non-government organisations. Now, some of the new things that are happening at the moment, there's a child and parents centre governance structure. That's in purple I've got there. That's one of the updates. At the Director General level, we now have the Mental Health Commissioner for Mental Health, and we also have the Director General for the Department of Aboriginal Affairs. They've been invited onto the senior committee, the senior coordination group for this initiative. So that group has expanded. We've defined the child and parent centre community of schools and the families within those a little more tightly. That's some of the work that we've been doing recently. Oh, that's not me. Oh, sorry. In terms of creating the vision for change, there was a lot of work that happened in pre-cabinet submission. Of course, when you're going to do this, it takes a lot of money, so you have to submit to Cabinet and ask for the money, and then they have a chat to Treasury, and Treasury says, no, you can't have all that money, you have to have a bit less. So they did that the first time. We have 16 child and parent centres at the moment. The first 10 they did that, but the second 6 they saw the success of the initiative, so they didn't give us the money that we asked for. So the second 6 have a slightly larger footprint, which is fantastic. So that's some of the work that we did. Edith Cowan University created a very good literature review for us that set the scene, and that came in quite early. And our service agreement contracts with all of our non-government organisations also created the vision for change in terms of setting out what we were asking them to do. We've also created communications guidelines, values guidelines, and many other forms of communications to keep on building on the vision for change. And then being able to communicate those, we've had multiple opportunities, and I don't have time to go into all of those. Many forums, and such as this one that we work through. Okay, some of the removing of the obstacles, legislation. What I can say is that last year we were able to have changes to the School Education Act. Normally you can't do anything on a school site unless a child's enrolled. Dental therapy is a little different. So we had to play catch up with legislation. We were doing this, and that's a lot of people think that policy informs practice. Well, I say it goes both ways. If policy isn't doing what it needs to do, practice needs to say, policy, you need to change or you need to update and be able to act through to the legislative framework, which is what we've done. Schools were doing a lot of things out there pre-kindergarten, and now we're also working in that direction. So there were changes to the School Education Act enabling the Department of Education to establish and maintain some joint arrangements in respect to the use of their facilities and certain conditions around that. We also introduced an early years education period, which links in with the Education and Care Services National Law, so that we're now able to work with and provide an educational program on a child's pre-compulsory years and a little younger. We've also created letters of agreement, and the most recent one is a letter of agreement between the Department of Education and the State Library. What we see is we've got 16 sites at the moment, but they don't have to do everything from 16 sites. So we're trying to create some things for the strategy. And one of the things is trying to have some agreements where Better Beginnings, for example, which is a literacy program, website, resources, training, hard copy resources for all of our child and parent centre sites. And we'll keep on trying to do that. Creating short-term wins. There's been a lot of achievements from the collaborative project groups. And this is the letter of agreement that we created. This is one of the most recent ones. We've finally got our operations manual up, which again is about embedding the vision. And that's the manual that goes with the 16 child and parent centre sites. And it has not only how to operate the child and parent centre, but a number of attachments for people to keep referring to. One of the greatest short-term wins that I have the pleasure of announcing today is that a colleague and I, Sandy Raymond and I, have been working on the Indigenous National Partnership with them and implementing that since 2009. But national partnerships by definition are end-dated, and it was end-dated 30th June 2014. Since the end of 2012, I have been attempting to convince Commonwealth and state governments that we need to do something for our 5 children and family centres. And it's with absolute delight that with a lot of work, we were able to convince and have our minister announce yesterday that the 5 Indigenous children and family centres will move in under the umbrella of state-run child and parent centres. They do have a licensed childcare component, which we won't be continuing. We'll be leasing that out because the state government does not work in the area of childcare. But it's very exciting news to be able to bring those across. And we have been working quite because I've been involved with those communities since 2009, we know them quite well. So they are very happy with the phone calls that we were making yesterday. So that's a fantastic short-term win to be able to, long journey, but a great short-term win to be able to talk about that. We have biannual progress reports that we get from our wonderful coordinators that we write, and they're going to be in the middle of the process of doing those for being able to provide them in July. There's a wealth of information in those progress reports. And they're short-term wins as well, because we have the opportunity for them to share the work that they're doing in each of their sites and the great progress that's being made. Anchoring the change in the corporate culture, well, I believe that that through the partnership forum and the work that Irina and WACOSS and other people are doing, and our colleagues in government departments, and through our letter of agreement that we also have with government departments in order to work collaboratively on this journey, we are anchoring the changes not only in our own culture, but I believe in the way Western Australia, the way that Western Australia goes about its business, because we're one of the few states that is creating such a fabulous partnership across government and non-government organisations. And next Tuesday, have the pleasure of have some Northern Territory colleagues who are coming across. How many minutes? I've run out of time. Coming across to have a look at what we're doing. So in running out of time, just to show you, this is the Child and Parent Centre Collie that's being developed in Collie. It's very, very exciting. And we have the coordinator over here, to be Carol, who's come up to have a chat. So you might like to have a chat with her about fabulous Collie Valley one. We've got Callista, just a few pictures of our child and parent centres on our school sites. They're all on school sites. And just to let you know about the area, this is Mount Lockyer Upper Geraldton. This is the defined community area. Sorry, not Mount Lockyer, of course. Range Way.
We're writing the map.
Mount Lockyer's in Albany. I always get those two names confused. I don't know why. So Mount Lockyer down there in Albany, and that's the defined community. Now what we can do with our maps is we are able to put, for example, the 0 to 4-year-olds across there, which is great data that the coordinators can use. And then we can overlay that with many, many other residential population programs as well, such as this one is for the residential population of our Aboriginal children, 0 to 4. So this is sort of some of the work that we're doing, some of the sessions that have occurred, estimated totals. So thank you very much for listening. It's very exciting. And I'm happy for you to be able to have the PowerPoint presentation, and I'll try and organise that a bit more. Thank you. Thanks, Robyn.
I think everyone's very happy to join with me in saying congratulations on securing the future funding for the Child and Family Centres, and I guess the integration and joining that up under the CPC initiative as well. So it's fantastic for those Aboriginal families and communities that are supported by the CFCs, who had a very uncertain future for the next couple of weeks up until yesterday. It's always unpleasant when these kinds of decisions are left right up until the 11th hour, but it's good when we get them over the line. So well done to everyone involved in that. I just wanted to share a little bit on the early childhood landscape, but I won't take too long because I know we're all here to hear from the real expert in the room, Tim Moore. Part of that needs to be updated based on what we've just heard from Robyn, but the Community Services Roundtable developed a bit of a paper to, thanks Julie, to highlight the difference between some of the different integrated or collaborative or co-located models of service delivery that exist in WA in the early childhood space. So we know about, I can use this. Oh, that wasn't smart. There we go. We know about the CPCs and the partnership model that exists there, but some of the other initiatives that happen supported by both the federal government and the state government in the early childhood space, and some new innovative projects that we're involved in as well. So WACOSS is part of the Partnership Forum's Early Years Working Group. That's co-chaired by the Department of Local Government and communities and WACOSS, and has members from state government agencies and not-for-profits. And that's working on designing a collective impact-based approach to early childhood service delivery in the Coburn and Kwinana region. And our hope is that the lessons we learn from that, if that proves to be a positive impact model, that we'll be able to scale that across other parts of the state through the Partnership Forum mechanism. And it's also supported by the corporate sector with initial funding from Woodside and a lot of interest from the Kwinana Industry Council as well. So a really another example of an innovative and collaborative model. We also have in the child protection space the family support networks, and there's 4 of those now: Armidale, Mirrabooka, the Midwest, and soon to be Fremantle, with a state plan for the expansion of those networks across WA. WACOSS is also putting together a new initiative which came out of the advice from our Children's Policy Advisory Council to set up a capacity building strategy to support early years networks across WA. So we're also pleased to be partnering with DLGC to deliver that service model out of the Parenting Centre in Mount Lawley. So we'll be providing support virtually and by getting up and about throughout the state to support those networks on the ground throughout the regions. So the roundtable thought it was important to help clarify some of the differences and some of the similarities between some of these different collaborative models. We have the child and parent centres, the communities for children sites, child and family centres, and the family support networks. That's just 4 of them. We did provide copies of the paper on your way in, and if you didn't pick one up, I encourage you to pick that up and have a look at it. The paper was designed to provide a bit of clarifying information, what's similar about them, what's different about them, how do they work together efficiently at different points of the service spectrum. So some of the things that are common, we know that they are both designed to respond to some of the local needs of the community, that they're delivered through non-government community partners, and that they're targeted at different points in the system. But in terms of what's distinguishing about them, they do have very different target groups. Some of them are targeted at Indigenous families, some of them are targeted at the primary end of delivering universal services, and others are more at the pointy end of intervening for families who are at risk or in crisis. They also have very different histories in terms of how they've emerged and who they've been funded by. So the paper has tried to help point all of that out and includes a diagram that shows you where the different services sit in the spectrum between universal service delivery and tertiary intervention. So I thank everyone who was involved in putting that together and suggest you have a read of it. But also that when we get to the session a little bit later today, that will be facilitated by Sue Nye, that you have a think about of the different models that you're involved in, and particularly the CPCs. What do you think is working well? Where do you think the opportunities are for improvement? What have we been learning by our involvement in this work? So bearing all of that in mind, that will hopefully be useful context for you as you listen to our keynote presentation from Tim Moore, who it's my pleasure to now introduce. So Tim is a Senior Research Fellow at Murdoch Children's Research Institute and the Manager of Research and Policy Team at the Centre for Child Health at the University of Melbourne. Based at the Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne, he's a trained teacher and psychologist and conducts research and project work aimed at improving early childhood services, regularly consulting with state and federal governments and non-government organisations on best practice. We've had the opportunity to spend a bit of time yesterday with Tim. Really excited about what we've already learnt just in the last 24 hours and looking forward to hearing more from you now. There will be time for questions and answers after his session, and then we'll have a bit more of an interactive panel following that. So please join me in welcoming Tim.
Thank you very much, Irina, and thank you for the invitation to be here. I've had the pleasure of spending some time in Western Australia quite recently, where I had the opportunity to engage with a number of the local inhabitants up in the Kimberley. And some of these were creatures I was very happy to meet, very cute and cuddly, or interesting and exciting. and some I wasn't quite so sure about. So what I'm going to talk about. I started off with a huge bunch of slides from different topics that are pertinent to the kinds of things we might be interested in today, and I've whittled them down to still far too many and chopped out whole topics in order to focus on this issue of engaging vulnerable families and communities and what we can do about this. So this slide presentation will be made available to you. It's going to be some sections we're going to rush through very, very briefly. I'm going to try and give you the picture. My inclination always is to go back to basics and ask, where are we now? What do we need to do? How do we need to do it? What's the evidence about effective ways of engaging vulnerable families and communities? That's what I'm going to try and summarise. I'm going to look at things like family-centred practice, the family partnership model, community-centred practice. I'm going to present the universal human services framework to resolve some of the dilemmas we've got in thinking about these issues, and reflections, and run out of time. So where are we now? Here are some key dot points that summarise the position as we understand it. This is based on work that my colleagues and I do all around Australia with place-based services of various kinds. It's also based on work that colleagues and I do in synthesising the research literature on a continuing basis to try and make sense of things. Early years, including the prenatal period, are of profound importance, and what happens to kids during that time have lifelong consequences. We've known this for a long time, but new evidence clarifies and strengthens this message. Some of it summarised in this paper, available on our website, Understanding the Nature and Significance of Early Childhood. But you'll find also in these books, familiar with Fiona Stanley's stuff, new book by Robert Putnam on the right about the situation in America, and along the bottom we've got the story about mismatch and the DOHAD story, the developmental origins of health and disease. If you want to read one of these, read your local immunologist from Perth, Susan Prescott. It's a very good book. We need to ensure that young children have conditions they need to develop well. A fundamental task. What I would call social climate change has had a profound impact on children, families and communities with mixed outcomes. Social climate change refers to the vast and rapid, unprecedented social changes that have occurred over the last 50 years that have been faster than at any other time in our history, and as a result, the conditions under which families are raising young kids are altered. We need to ensure that the conditions they need to raise kids as they and we would wish. That's what we've got to focus on when we're thinking about what place-based and all your programs do, about the conditions under which families are raising young kids. Many children and families have benefited greatly from the changes, but a significant minority have not. There's evidence of worsening or unacceptably high levels of problems in the minority of children. They affect all aspects of their functioning. So far, efforts by governments and services to address the worst of these outcomes have not had a significant effect. We're trying to change the curve, as Robyn said, and we haven't really done that, which is why we're interested in the kinds of programs that we're talking about today. And that's partly because the nature of the problems have changed. Many of the most pressing problems are complex or wicked, meaning that they can't be sorted out by a single agency or a single program, but require coordinated efforts. So what do we need to do? Such problems can't be addressed by single services, departments or sectors, but require coordinated efforts of multiple players at multiple levels. Something to make clear, not all problems are complex or wicked. There are areas and places where traditional models work perfectly well. We don't need to deal with those. Targeting those areas, those particular areas where the problems are complex and intertwined and need to be addressed in a coordinated way. This will require new forms of place-based, collaborative organisations involving many stakeholders. And we need to think what the stakeholders is. It's broader than we might usually think of. But it begins with family, community members. There are faith-based and community services, service clubs, non-government services, businesses and local chambers of commerce, local, state, federal government services and policies. Last of all on this, in their families, these are the people who need to be at the table. One of the questions that I would always ask and challenge a group like this, who's here? Who's at the table at an important meeting like this? Do you have representatives of all the stakeholders? It will require also new ways of working with families and communities. We need to view their needs from their perspective, not think solely of service solutions, about things from a professional perspective. I hope we get a chance to explore that in discussions. But a very important point. Families and communities need to be involved as full partners in the design, delivery and evaluation of community and service initiatives. If not, their take-up of services will be reduced. Outcomes worse. So that's a message that we're going to explore. This is a paper from a colleague and I did for the Benevolent Society on the big picture. What do we need to do? We were suggesting that what we need is a multi-level ecological approach to early intervention that involves programs, community and service system level changes. So the big picture is what we need to do is we need to intervene at an early childhood education and care and early intervention service level. We need to intervene at community and system level, and we need to think about societal and structural level. And if we just go in at one level, one part of that, we were unlikely to be successful at achieving significant sustainable change. We need to intervene at multiple levels simultaneously. So the ecological model that Robyn was referring to is very pertinent here. It looks like that. So we need interventions here, here and here. We unpack them a bit, they look like this. We need to provide high quality, inclusive childhood education and care services for all children. The universal provision model, some of which are provided through the programs we're talking about today. We need to blend early childhood education and care, childcare and early education programs. We need to integrate child and family centres, which is what some of you are doing. We need to create family-friendly early childhood services environments where parents can stay. The old models handed your kid over and you got them back at the end of the day, hopefully in the same state. And but you weren't allowed in to watch the magic that people do. At the community level, we need neighbourhood and community level interventions which are about building networks. We need service system levels, which include building strong universal service systems and so on. This question you're grappling with today, how to integrate the various services into a single system. We need place-based approaches, and we need whole of community or collective impact. It's not quite the same thing. And at the third level, the societal and structural level, we need to address the conditions under which families are raising young kids. Governments can do this. This means housing, employment, transport, not just the usual kinds of services. What are the things that we need to do to enable families to do the job that they want to do? Families don't stuff their kids up intentionally. They do so because they lack the resources or things conspire against them. Develop new ways of working in partnership with communities and families. That's the big challenge I'm going to try and unpack, and raise public awareness around the nature and importance of the early. I don't think we've got a full understanding among the professional community. We've got a full understanding, a good understanding at policy level, both federal and state. I don't think the public argument has been won yet. The childcare debate. So this is the second question. How do we need to do this? That's what we need to do. That just gives you the big picture. Now I want to unpack how we need to do it, which is the engaging partner. And this is a long story. I've been involved in these kinds of thinking about these issues for the past 30 years or so. But more recently, my colleagues and I did a paper for ARACI, the Australian Research Alliance for Children and Youth, and our centre, who were developing a new home visiting program. And I said, what do we know about effective programs? So we looked at the evidence. We found the best one was David Olds, but the indications were that these programs don't work very effectively, only modestly effective, and that there seem to be other factors that were contributing to the outcomes that weren't captured in the traditional studies. So we offered to do a second review, and this was about a literature review about effective processes and strategies rather than effective programs. And we concluded that there was general support for the notion that process aspects of service delivery, and that evidence-based practice involves not just the efficacy of the program, but also the efficacy of the process, the way the program is delivered. Here are my sources of evidence. Lessons from vulnerable families, research on psychotherapy efficacy, research on effective health practices, family-centred practice, family-centred research, family partnership training, community practice, co-design and co-production. I can't go through all of them. I'll have a look at each of them to see whether they come up with a coherent message that tells us about how to do this. Lessons from vulnerable families. We've got a policy brief which summarises some of this work. A number of key elements of effective service delivery have been repeatedly identified in the research literature. This comes from work not on randomised controlled trials. It comes from going and asking vulnerable families, what's it like to receive service? Why didn't you stay with that service? Doing interviews with people who drop out. And checking what factors from their perspective are important for them. They want services. The key features are that services need to be relationship-based, involve a partnership between parents and professionals. Target goals that the parents see are important. Provide parents with choices regarding strategies. Build parental competencies and non-stigmatising. Demonstrate cultural awareness and sensitivity. Maintain continuity of care, meaning don't keep chopping and changing the person who's doing this. These process variables appear to be of particular importance for the most vulnerable families who are less likely to make use of professional services that don't possess such qualities. Very important point. Actually accessing the service and then making use of it when they're there. But what vulnerable and marginalised families need are services that help them feel valued and understood and are non-judgmental and honest, that have respect for their inherent human dignity and are responsive to their needs rather than being prescriptive. Allow them to feel in control, help them feel capable, competent, empowered, are practical, and help them meet their self-defined needs, are timely, providing help when they feel they need it, not weeks, months, or even years later. A problem with waiting to devil our service system and provide continuity of care. They value the sense of security that comes from a long-term relationship with the service provider. So we put ourselves in the position of the client, the family, the community, and ask ourselves, are we doing those things? That's a very useful set of working with vulnerable families. These are kinds of texts which I have found helpful. Susan Landy's book and this book on developmental parenting is also good. And of course the second edition of Sue Gerhardt's book on I Love Habits. Efficacy in psychotherapy. What comes out of psychotherapy is that all talking therapies work. None of them work better than any of the others. But They work not because of the unique contribution of any particular model, but because of a set of common factors or mechanisms of change that cut across all effective therapies. And the two main things are the therapeutic alliance, therapist term, or that relationship base, and the personal qualities of the therapists themselves. And this study, psychiatrists' effects of psychopharmacological treatment of depression, illustrates this. This was a randomized controlled trial of a drug to treat depression. And they used a placebo, and the drug worked, but who saw the patient rather than what they prescribed had a bigger effect. So what happened was some psychiatrists were consistently more effective than others, regardless of whether they were prescribing the drug or the placebo. And if you look at the top third of the most effective psychiatrists, they got better results using the placebo than the worst third got using the drug. And so conclude that the psychiatrist is not only a provider of treatment, but a means of treatment. We are the therapy. That is the message from the psychotherapy research. Research on effective health giving, what does that say? It's from Carl Dunst and Carol Trippett in the States. They were very thorough about their analysis. Effective health giving, based upon the research they've reviewed, is both positive and proactive, conveys a sincere sense of health giver warmth, caring and encouragement, is offered in response to indicated need for assistance, engages the help receiver in choices and decisions about the options, is normative and typical of the help receiver's culture and values, similar to how others would obtain assistance. This is an interesting point. Is congruent with how the help receiver views the appropriateness of it. It's got to be something that they feel comfortable with, the method. The response costs don't outweigh the benefit to the client, in the sense of the amount of effort they do. It includes opportunities for reciprocating, ability to limit indebtedness. My wife is a counselling psychologist, a client who insists on bringing muffins every time, even though she's paying. It needs to reciprocate. It bolsters the self-esteem of the help receiver by making the resource and support procurement immediately successful. So, short-term stuff. Promotes the use of informal supports. Don't automatically go to the formal sources of supports. It provided in the context of help giver receiver collaboration and promotes effective behaviour that increases for the same intent. You want to build skills that are going to last over time. You want to do yourself out of the job, basically. And actively involves the health receiver in obtaining the supports. So it boils down to three components. Technical quality. You got to know your job. As a speech pathologist, as a social worker, as an early childhood educator, the more confident you are, effective you'll be. Relational practices. This is the effective help giving stuff. And participatory practices, the term they use, which is the business of giving help receiver choice and decision making. So there, the person is involved in selecting the strategy and in gathering resources. Not all done by the professional. The more you do those three things together, the more effective you'll be. And the second two elements, says the first two elements, the second two elements can't be faked. Help receivers are especially able to see through help givers who act as if they care, but don't, and help givers that give the impression that help receivers have meaningful choices and decisions when they don't. Very important point. I'll tell you why that's about. First I want to mention the important role of beliefs. Both the professional and the parent have to believe. It's important for the effectiveness of any help you offer. Parental belief, they have to believe in the intervention plan. It's a form of placebo. They have to believe this is going to work. And they have to believe in their ability to do it. And the professional has to believe in the efficacy of the intervention as well. they have to also believe in the parents' ability to do it. And this is the hard bit, because there are people in our field, look at the behaviour of the people who don't believe it. But believing in the capacity of people to develop skills and become more confident at managing the kids, but also more confident at being a partner in the planning and delivery of services requires a big shift for some of us. How the neurobiology of interpersonal relationships, you could spend all day talking to you about them. That's fascinating. Our brains constantly communicate with other people's brains via subconscious high-speed pathways. We give signals that are read by other people. And these enable us to register other feelings and states of mind and enable us then to register ours, which is why we can't fake being hearing. We're talking about your tone of voice, your eye movement, your facial expression. All of these things are communicating signals that we are not in control of and that are read by other people through processes that they're not in control of, but which create in them a sense of what it is that they're thinking. That then comes to our consciousness where we say, well, I'm not comfortable with this person, or I do like this person. But it's gone through this very automatic. We are intensely social creatures, and our brains are shaped by relationships, for good or otherwise, and that's particularly true for kids. Relationships continue to play an important role in shaping our health and well-being throughout our lives, hence the importance of relationship-based work. The stuff I read to get a handle on these kinds of things, I recommend any of these. The Emotional Life of Your Brain is readily available and worth reading. Relationships affect parallel processes, a term used in mental health field. It's about the way that relationships affect other relationships. Message for me, Kyle. Sorry. Parallel processes operate at all levels of the chain of relationships and services, so that our capacity to relate to others is supported or undermined by the qualities of our own relationships. Okay? So there is a flow on it. So the way that we relate to our clients models the way that we want them to relate to their kids. And the more we relate to them in that kind of way, that promotes their capacity to do that. But our own capacity to do that is dependent upon the people who manage us and who are around us also behaving towards us in the same way. So there's a cascade effect. Quality of relationships at one level shapes the quality of relationships at all levels. The more that they all share positive characteristics, the more likely it is that the service providers at the whole case will be able to support families in a way which help families behave towards their kids. Okay, switching. I'll switch quickly to the wonderful topic of evidence-based practice, which I think as well. It's a challenge for many people. Discussions that we had yesterday, some of this issue came out. The problem with, say, Communities for Children requires you to choose some of your programs from a list of programs. Here's what Peter Fonagy and colleagues call. This is a good book, What Works for Whom, a critical review of treatment for children and adolescents. Got chapters on all the many things that you'll be grappling with. But what he says is the mere availability of evidence-based therapy is unlikely to deliver good outcomes for children and young people. It's treating evidence-based practice as selecting a single program from a list is a parody of what evidence-based practice is. From statement. There are many more issues to consider, and two of them most important that comes out of the review that they do all of these programs. The involvement of families and children in decision-making concerning therapy, and routine observations of the impact of treatment. An important part of the story that for what we're talking about today. These two factors alone contribute as much to the outcomes of choice of treatment. More specifically, evidence-based practice is often narrowly interpreted as collecting and selecting from a list of proven interventions. It's much broader than that. It involves reviewing research evidence, yes, identifying patient preferences, systematically observing progress in the course of treatment, and adapting treatment interventions in response to ongoing outcomes. So this doesn't sound like what we've been taught and told and we should be doing. So it's an interesting message. We need to base it on patient preferences or the topic that you're focusing on and the method that you're choosing. You've got to monitor whether it's working or not. If it's not working, you tweak it. You're meant to tweak evidence-based programs. You have to deliver them faithfully. Evidence-based practice is best understood as a decision-making process that integrates all four of these sources of evidence on an ongoing basis. Briefly, what that's about. Overall, the evidence is clear. How services are delivered is important as what is delivered. Outcomes are not simply the result of a device, but are determined also by the ways in which the advice is given and the manner in which support is provided, offered, etc. Influences whether the support has positive, neutral, or negative consequences. The two bodies of work that I draw upon that capture this stuff best are family-centred practice, Carl Dunstan, Carol Tribbett, and the family partnership model developed by Robyn Davis, Kristen Day. That's the American and the UK models respectively. Knowing the protagonists involved, Carl Dunstan, Robyn Davis, characters. The intellectual traditions they're drawing upon also have very distinct differences. Their approaches are different. What is striking is they come up with the same list, telling us something about the importance of what we've been discussing. The rationale can be summed up like this. If service providers and families work collaboratively to identify family goals and priorities, then services are more likely to address families' most salient needs. If professionals determine what the goal should be, then the issues that are most important for families and have most impact on their lives are likely to be overlooked. If service providers and families work as partners to determine what action should be taken, there's a greater probability that the desired outcomes will be achieved. If decisions about goals and actions are made by professionals, then they are less likely to be realisable in the circumstances in which the family lives. Families know what's going to work for them. If service providers listen to families and establish good working relationships with them, then parents are more likely to listen to them. Don't listen to people who don't listen to you. If families feel that professionals do not really understand their views or circumstances, they're less likely to trust what professionals have to offer. It makes you less effective. If service providers support family decision making, families are more likely to develop confidence, and ability to make decisions about their child and family over their lifetime. Because support services for families drop away. There's lots of stuff nowadays in the early years. If service providers and parents share and respect each other's knowledge and expertise, better solutions are likely to be found. Our solutions, parent knowledge of the child and family is ignored, intervention strategies are less likely to be effective. We only know the stuff we know. We don't know what they know about their circumstances. Those two things together. If child and family needs are met solely through professional sources of help, families are more likely to become dependent on services. Seeing them off your books. Service providers help families identify and mobilise family and community sources of help. Their dependence on scarce professional resources is reduced. Okay. Not a lot of time, no time to explore community-centred practice, but you don't need to explore it. Engagement and partnering simply involve the relationship between a service system and groupings of community. We're talking about a service system working with family groups. And the same principles that have been shown to be effective in engaging, empowering families at an individual level are also effective at a community level. Community-centred practice is family-centred practice writ large. That's the message. Evidence from community practice, community development, we've known this stuff for 30 years. They come up with the same kinds of principles. And you can take that list that I just did and substitute the word communities. If service providers and communities work collaboratively to identify community goals and priorities, then services are more likely to address the salient needs, if professional, etc. You go through that 6 points and do the same thing, and it would all hold true in terms of evidence. For service systems to engage community groups effectively, the members of those groups need to be engaged with one another. A very important part of that we need to take on board. The people, the family, when you try to do consultation and you do a survey of individual people, what you get is far less meaningful and valuable than if you have people who know each other and communicate with each other frequently and have a group view. What you want is the emergent group view, not a total survey. Forming supportive personal networks is important for parents in their own right, to promote their parenting, their mental health, but it also allows shared group concerns to emerge. And what we need to know are the emergent views of groups of parents and community members rather than the combined views of individuals. We need to provide families with multiple opportunities to meet. Some of the programs do that. And the programs that have an open door and allow people to stay are the ones that are proving to be particularly helpful for vulnerable families who otherwise going stir crazy. There's a bunch of books on the social network effects. They're all interesting and valuable, these ones, and it's an important message to understand. Here's a bunch of books that are about the community practice, community-centred practice, if you like. Up there as well. This is just out. This is just confirming this kind of notion. This is from HAPE's website, What Works in Effective Indigenous Community Management. It says here are the things. The community has ownership and control over decision making. Local staff work on the program and in the organisation. Trusting relationships with partners are established. Flexibility. So on. All of these things are saying the same kind of message. So here's the universal framework. Because the dilemma we've got, partly, among other things, is how do we reconcile all this business about how you do stuff with this other powerful message we get about evidence-based practice and selecting programs. So if you select a program from a list and then say, this is the U-Group program, you go into a community, we're going to roll out this program because it's been proven to be effective. Without going through, how does that get reconciled with the business of finding out what families need first and whether this is actually the program they want, whether it addresses the issue they need, etc. It be as effective as you like, but if you haven't done that kind of work. So we need to start with relationship building. We know what the key features are. They are to do with attunement, responsiveness, and authenticity. We need then to go through a deliberate process of working out what outcomes we're going to look at. And the outcomes that we agreed need to be those that are most salient to and valued by the clients. This model works for individuals or groups or communities. Universal scalable model. Then you need to think about strategy. And the agreed strategies need to be acceptable and usable to the client. But this is the strategies is where the evidence-based bit comes in. So the evidence-based practices, how you do things, is embedded through all of these processes. Evidence-based treatment comes in at this point. This is where we bring it to the table and say, this is some of the stuff that we know. Is this going to work for you guys? But you're also looking at what the parents want. And the strategy that's chosen has to be acceptable and usable by the client. Then you implement it. And it's at this point you're doing process monitoring. Are the strategies working as intended? Here, we pick up on Peter Fonagy's point about the importance of monitoring the well-being and the service delivery on the run at the beginning and end of every session, not every 6 months. Are you satisfied with the service? What we're trying to do is do something far more responsive and light-footed that we want. And there are ways of doing this that we can talk about that enable you to immediately check when you are deviating from what the parents or the community actually wants, continuing on your fixed path. And that implies that the services we deliver need to have some capacity and locked down so that our resources are tied up in a rigid kind of way. And then, of course, we need to monitor the outcomes. Are they having the impact that we need? I could talk about the relationship building. I won't go into this, but the important thing to understand about this whole process, this is the first stage. You want to build a shared trust. The thing is, you have to think about both people. When we're talking about the processes that we've been talking about, it sounds as if we're saying, just got to do what the family wants or the community wants. No, they have to make the final decision. But we, as professionals, as governments, have legitimate concerns and specific knowledge. And although the ultimate decision in order to ensure maximum take-up might need to be made by the client group, we have to put our bit in at every stage. And we'd be in dereliction of our duty if we didn't. Let them know what we know. We have to let them know what strategies we know about. The question is how you do that. We're not saying this is now in this way of doing things. We're not saying this is the way you do it. We're saying this is what we know. Tell me what you try. What works for you? And so on. In order to pool those two sets of efficacy, of expertise, and to come up with answers that are better than either of the group do on their own. This process describes a family which begins with engagement and tuning into family values rather than professionals deciding. Evidence-based practices have an important role to play, but they're not introduced. Partnership has been established and you've understood the values. And the process allows for constant adjustment based on feedback. The message from wicked problems is that you cannot know beforehand what's going to work. And what you have to do is choose something that we're all agreed looks like a goer and try it and then monitor immediately. Not 6 months, 12 months down the track. You do it straight away because you can't know beforehand what will work. Doesn't matter if it's evidence-based, you still don't know if it's going to work. That's strength rather than a weakness, as the process of constant adjustment makes it more likely that the interventions will be manageable for the family and ultimately effective. The generic framework, you can use it at different levels. Some of you will know our centre's platform service redevelopment framework. That's an example of that model applied at a systems level. Whatever the context, the use of this framework should maximise clients' take-up of services. That is, their willingness to access professional services. Remember that the evidence says that the most vulnerable families don't use services. They go once and don't come back, put off by superficial things, or they're intimidated, or whatever it is. It also maximise their ability to make use of the support provided and whether this leads to actual changes. Now, I need to check time.
And then 15 for questions. So you're welcome to eat into your question time a little bit.
I'm sitting for I'm going to give you an example of the Tasmanian Child Entertainment Centre as an exemplary model. I'll go straight to make you happy. Summary
I think people want the example. I think they're happy to eat into a little bit of their question time. Yeah? If you're happy to go back.
That's fine. Engaging and partnering families and communities are essentially relational processes. Success depends upon the nature and quality of the relationship established between loads involved. What a message. We all know this, but on the other hand, we don't necessarily do it. We don't check whether we're doing it. We don't necessarily get training. Skills needed to establish collaborative partnership relationships are well understood, eminently trainable. Most readily available form of training is the standard partnership model, which in its new version, 25, does a much better job not only of teaching you how to listen and respond and so on, but also how to help people establish goals and outcomes. So it works very well for the model I've described. The operation of parallel processes implies that direct service providers will be more likely to engage with families if their managers and others use similar practices. Evidence-based practice is probably regarded as a decision-making process drawing upon several sources rather than a selection from a list of evidence. The process of engagement and partnering is a necessary but not sufficient condition for change. It can be complemented by strategies that build the skills of parents and caregivers, that enable them to provide their kids with environments and experiences that promote their development. So engaging and partnering doesn't lead to change. Makes everyone feel good. Gets a good set of goals up and so on. It doesn't change behaviour. It's the medium through which we do stuff. Robyn pointed that out, emphasising keep the outcome in mind. Don't make a difference here. Establishing integrated services doesn't do that. It's what you do with the services that you need to think about. Engagement and partnering are the medium through which interventions to change behaviour are driven, but you cannot treat engaging and partnering merely as stages to be gone through in order to achieve the changes that you would like. It has to be done authentically, take up to occur. So it's a very interesting kind of dilemma. Yeah, we've got to engage with them, and then we'll come up with the goals that we want. So this willingness to suspend or to think about our priorities and goals in a different way as part of what goes into the mix, rather than determining what the outcomes are. Universal Human Services Framework seeks to incorporate key features of effective health-giving decision-making process that includes evidence-based strategies and outcomes-based monitoring. So, different forms of helping. If you do things to people, direct or control your coded agenda to change people as you judge it, then you'll get compliance or resistance and no building of skills. If you do things for people, such as charitable work, no expectation of the parent doing anything or reciprocating, you'll provide temporary relief but no building of skills. If you do things with people, you have partnerships, shared powers. There are benefits for parents. You'll build confidence and skills and their self-reliance. Through people, partnership with a shared agenda to promote child skills and participation, to get benefits for the child, family, and create positive environments for everyone. So think about what level it is that we are operating. Thank you.
And that was an excellent presentation and with incredible depth and volume of information and the succinctness with which you put it. I do hope you are happy to share the slides with us,
yes.
Particularly all the referrals to the other reference material, yes, which people will want to get stuck into.